Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is the grittiest guy I know, Jacob Hester. Hester, what's the grittiest thing that you've done in the last month? Because I could come up with two suggestions for you right off the bat.
Oh, I see. I like you giving me what you might think it is because, I never want to be self-serving. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, I want to hear what you think it might be.
Okay, so starters, when we do our Thursday off-campus segments together, I can usually get a pretty good gauge of how fresh you are, and you bring it every single time. Okay, so it's notable when you're not at 100%. You
Right.
are a push through sickness guy. Correct.
Yes.
2 weeks ago, it was, I think, that you were nowhere near 100%. Like we're playing like late November
Yeah.
regular season type stuff, and you battled through, and you did probably what, like 8 hours or 7 hours of radio that day. Correct. I
Yeah.
mean,
Probably
you were under the
seven.
weather.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Probably seven. I had very little voice left that day, but I had enough. That's something like my old man would tell me, like, you might not have it all, but you got enough. So, yeah, I mean, you got to find a way. You got to find a way somehow.
You went full Reese Davis on us, and it was great. But you actually sound a lot better than Reese, so I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that. But like Reese, a double header that you pulled off, an impressive double header. I didn't even realize that you had this much on your plate on the weekends now as well with
Yeah.
what you're doing with LSU radio. But tell the people the Herb Street doubleheader that you
Yeah.
willingly pulled off, that you could have gotten out of very, very easily if you had just said, "Look, I've already got this planned," and
Yeah.
just done one thing instead of two.
Yeah, certainly not the way that I was raised. Like, my parents both just worked, like, always worked. They worked graveyard shift, like 11 to 7 type stuff. And so, like, my grandpa would have to come over and watch us. And so, like, I always saw my parents work. And so, like, that part of it, like, there's no real excuse. And it's like, yeah, you could have avoided it, but it would have been something where you would have missed a lot of fun. So I didn't want to do that. So I on Friday night, I fly from New Orleans to Dallas. I get in late. We wake up early that next morning and we do a big pregame show for Sirius XM right in front of the Cotton Bowl. And that show went up until I believe it was 2 p.m. Central. And so I had about an hour to get to the airport, go through security, get on a plane, somehow, some way. Um, my boss at SiriusXM, shout out to Olivia. She had like an Uber waiting on me. So, like, we get off air.
Dang.
I jump in to that Uber. We go from the Cotton Bowl. Now, it would have been closer to go to Love, but they didn't have the flight that would match up. And so I had to go to DFW. So we get there and I fly from Dallas to New Orleans because, like, if I tried to fly into Baton Rouge, I just felt like that would have been messed up. Game day traffic would have still been there. So direct flight to New Orleans. I get in a car and I go maybe a little bit above the speed limit. And then I tried to pull like a veteran move and it actually worked out in my favor. And all this, by the way, had to go off without any hitch. Like, there's no way could I have gotten it done if we'd have arrived like 15 minutes late or whatever. We actually gained 12 minutes in the air. So that was perfect for me. And so I sprint to my car. I'm driving and I had an Uber waiting at my house for me because my house is on the way from New Orleans to Tiger Stadium. And so I had an Uber waiting on me so I could park my car, get into the Uber, and they could drive me as close as possible to the stadium because I didn't have time to go park in my normal parking spot and run all the way. So they were waiting on me. I get in the Uber and he does, like, I tell him the situation and he was like a listener of my local show. So he understood the situation and he's like, we're going to get you there. He was like, I am going to be, handsome Rob in the Italian Job. We're going to find a way. And he did. Shout out to him. I mean, he was driving like a bat out of hell. And so we get there and he lets me out right in front of Tiger Stadium. And the kickoff was 6:44, and I get into the radio booth because I sprint. And there's like this line to get into the media elevator, and they use the same ones like premium suites as well.
Yep.
And so, like, there was all these people that I recognized that want to talk about, can't talk, can't have conversations. I'm sorry, I'm not being rude. I got to get to the booth. And I'm like cutting everybody. And like the LSU coaches are like right behind me. I'm like, oh, this is actually good. I'm going to get in the elevator with these LSU coaches and I'm going to get up there. They're going to allow me to do it. So thankfully, like Blake Baker and Joe Sloan all those guys are coming up. Actually, Blake was on the field. So it was Joe Sloan. I'm trying to think who the defense coach was, but I remember seeing Joe And so we all get on the elevator and we go up and I sprint off the elevator. I look like another Jason Statham character here in Crank, when he's in the elevator and he's got the epinephrine after he hits it in and comes out of the elevator sprinting. That was me when the doors opened for the media elevator, try to get to the booth. So 6:44 kick, and I think I got there like 6:41
Unreal.
up into the booth. And so, national anthem's just finishing up. Here comes the coin toss, put the headset on, and called Ole Miss LSU. And that was, ended up being obviously a great game there, overtime game. And so I got a chance to pull the great value Kirk Herbstreit 2 in 1 day.
Kirk does it an entire season.
I don't know how
he doesn't have the
timeline.
Yeah, he doesn't have the timeline that you did where you were rushing from point A to point B just
Yeah,
to be able to
I got very
there.
lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, like you and Jordan Rodgers have to deal with a little bit more of like the tradition. It's not, and Jordan's got
Yeah.
he's got the PJ situation, but you get what, like it's so frantic to have to do that, and I can't imagine you for the first like 5 minutes of that game showing any sign whatsoever that you had just done that. That was
Yeah.
probably something that you didn't discuss on air or anything like that. You just snapped in. You're like, I'm in Tiger Stadium. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, and it helps that I knew the opponent. Like doing off campus every day, like I feel like you get a good idea of who the opponent is. It's in the SEC. I know Ole Miss. I know the roster. If it would have been like a non-conference game, like say
UCLA.
like UCLA comes to mind, and I pulled double on that day, but thankfully our pregame show was in Baton Rouge that day. Like it happened to be LSU, UCLA. But like even that, like I had to run to the booth that day. And look, there's a lot of, names on a UCLA roster that I might know some. I surely don't know them all. And I got to give the starting lineups. And there's some changes right before kickoff. And their SID comes in there. He's like, hey, A, B, and C are out. Go ahead and put these three guys in there. And you're like, oh my God, where's my flip card? Where's the flip card at? Because I felt like I had it. But so for me to pull off like the true double, it was okay. Ole Miss being the opponent. I watched tape when I was flying into New Orleans, and like kind of my last prep of the game. And then like Walter Nolan and Chris Paul and like all these names you already knew coming into the game. So that certainly helped.
If ever you need someone last minute prep, just hit me up. Moments notice, like, hey, just give me 5 minutes. Let's just get me in the right state of mind.
Yeah.
I'm always available. You know that. Okay. So if it's needed, I don't think it'll be needed with you.
No, I mean, certainly if I need to know how to say a name, and I mean this, I'm calling you. Like you're the guy that I'm going to call. So I'm old school. Like I write like everything down. I write everything. There's no like spreadsheets. There's no, like a lot of people do, things that you're probably supposed to do in 2024, like with the computer and the laptop and and the iPad. All those things are great. But I just, man, there's something about like I have one now. Like I always have a pen in my hand, and it's going to be a flare tip. That's the only ones I use, and I go different color. So whatever the team is, I write their notes in that color. And so when my eyes go down to the page, they know, okay, Ole Miss, it's red, or if you're playing Auburn, it's orange, or like whatever it might be. And so that's kind of my system. And so like I was trying to get all that done on the plane. But you would definitely, if I need to know how to say a name, I'm calling Connor.
We're like, all right, Yamaleava, Wigman. We're gonna go.
You and I are both on the You and I are both on the Wigman stuff. It's like, guys,
we can do this.
Pronunciation guide. It's Wig, not Weg.
Yeah, I don't know
Let's
why.
all do this together.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. All right, let's talk some Bama-LSU here. What's the vibe of LSU coming off of what was just a shell shocking type loss against A&M? You get the bye week in between. Probably in some ways good timing. In other ways, you probably just want to play another football game again. Right. But where do you get the sense of in terms of where this team's at right now?
Yeah, what a weird game flow. I'm sitting here and I'm trying to think of one that had the same. One team dominating the first half and then completely getting dominated in the second half. 2005 LSU Tennessee. It was a Monday night in Tiger Stadium during hurricane time that year. We had multiple hurricanes, and we were up 21-0. They brought in a backup quarterback, Rick Clausen, who actually was a former LSU player, and he kind of led them on a comeback. And we lost that game in overtime, but the second half, like we didn't get dominated as bad as this happened, a couple of weeks ago, but it was still kind of the same game flow. We dominated the first half, couldn't put them away. And that's the only game that I could even remember had a game flow like that. So, certain situations played into it, but at the end of the day, you didn't make the plays and Texas A&M did. It's like, okay, well, how do you bounce back from that? Because you showed you can be that team in the first half, but you have got to try to one snap and clear that second half because it was as bad as it possibly could be. Garrett Nussmeier for the first time looked like a first-year starting quarterback. He hadn't shown that. The defense that's gotten better each and every week, well, they weren't ready for Marcel Reed. They started to give up, big plays on the ground, which is something they've really done a nice job of stopping really since the South Carolina game. And so I actually think that the bye week's perfect for them. And I'm like you, like I want to get back on the field. I want to get that bad taste out of my mouth, but they needed to. They had probably gotten the most they possibly could out of the situations that they had in front of them. Like they were getting players playing at their highest level. They were playing, probably above where they were, like in a good way. Like they were raising their level of play, but they needed to get away, take a deep breath, get a couple of guys probably healthy. CJ Daniels is a name that a lot of people won't talk about, and they're not going to be because they didn't talk about Kyron Lacey and some other players, Aaron Anderson now. But like CJ Daniels is big, and he played I think 11 plays against A&M. Like that's a guy that LSU currently, the way they're built, they need a CJ Daniels, and so they kind of need everybody to be healthy because again, they were getting the most out of their guys, and Blake Baker certainly on defense. But I think they needed to hit a little bit of a reset, a little bit of a break as they head into this Bama game.
What do you make of the year that Nussmeier's had? Because I think if you had just looked at what he did to start off that A&M game, and then if he continues that and he continues to be one of the better quarterbacks in not just in the SEC but all of college football, you're thinking he's got a chance to go in the first round of the NFL draft. Now you're kind of looking at some of the flaws that you've seen late in some of these games. You're wondering, 1 year starter, is that maybe going to be a situation where he has to come back and you see more of these flaws with him? I think it's been more good than bad, but I'm kind of curious what the vibe of him has been, with the mistakes that he's made and obviously having a lot of those great games as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously right after the A&M game, like the fan base is questioning a lot of things, but it's like, guys, like, hold up. Like, let's take a look at, the second half against a really good South Carolina defense. Let's look at when they had to have him against Ole Miss, right? It was him versus Jackson Dart, and he was the winner of that battle. Like those fourth down throws that he made, I don't know there's anybody else in the SEC that could have thrown those with the anticipation that he did. And so I think there's been way more good. Like even in the UCLA or USC loss, like he played well in that game. So I think they understand that there's a lot of good there. The Arkansas game, he played fantastic, I thought. And so it's one of those situations where unfortunately you knew it was probably going to happen. He's going to have a first year starter type game. Now it was really a half, but he had that. And remember, you and I talked about Nussmeier before he was even the starter. Like he still has a little bit of that gunslinger mentality. There's going to be some throws you're like, oof, man, you just got to throw that one into the ground or throw it up into the third row of the stands. And it just so happened that like all those moments kind of came at the worst possible time and at the same time. And so, I don't know how the fan base feels. Obviously, they're probably like, hey, we're spoiled. We've had Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels in the last 5 years, but I think they're also a smart enough fan base where they understand you typically don't get this kind of production from a first year quarterback, no matter how old he is. And so they're certainly on the Nuss bus. I don't think they've jumped off of what he can do. Now, this is going to be yet again another challenge for him. Kane Womack's going to have that defense, ready to go with some different looks because Womack, by the way,
Womack.
No, hold on now.
Kane Womack.
He told me himself.
Okay.
Should we call Kane? Actually, I can't call him during LSU Bama.
Let's if he calls it that way.
People say Womack, and he said Womack.
Kane Womack. See, I looked up like the Indiana pronunciation guide. I looked up the Bama pronunciation guide with him.
I looked up the Kane himself pronunciation guide. I'm gonna have to call him though, because you're so good. You're so good at this.
I want to know. I don't want to pronounce somebody's name wrong.
At least we don't say Womack. That's what everybody says, and that's definitely not right. Okay. Yep. All right. I feel like one of us is right, and so everybody else is wrong. Anyways, So he's going to have something ready for him. I mean, bye week, he's a great defensive mind. And I know Bama fans are like, we're not used to getting up this many points. Hey, he just got there. He's got a little bit of a different system. He hasn't even had the chance to recruit to that system. But, all that being said, he's going to have something for Nussmeier in that offense. How do they handle that? You're going to be without Garrett Dellinger. He's ruled out. He had tightrope surgery. So you're going to have a new offensive lineman in there. That's going to be crucial. So, look, Garrett Nussmeier is, if you win, it's going to be a reason why you win the game. There's no question about it. I still think he is a top tier SEC quarterback. I don't think you have any quarterback in the SEC running away with that title, and he's still firmly, for me, in that conversation. And so it'll be interesting to see what they do. It'll be interesting to see how he bounces back, right? And the offense became one-dimensional, to say the least, against Texas A&M, and that's a part that nobody really wants to talk about. But A&M, and hell, everybody in that stadium knew what LSU was going to do because it's all they could do. And when you become that in the SEC against a front seven like A&M, you're not going to have a lot of success, even if you have a really good offensive line, which LSU does. Like before that game, an offensive lineman hadn't been credited a sack to that point. But when you become that one dimensional, when you run the ball, what was it, 23 times for 24 yards? Yeah, you're not going to have a great day at quarterback. And so he needs some of his partners around him to help him out as well.
What concerns you the most about Bama, and why is it anytime Ryan Williams isn't directly matched up with Zy Alexander?
Yeah, so is he going to travel? Like that's going to be key because Zy switched to Trey Harris in that game against Ole Miss.
Yep.
Trey Harris was cooking ash and stamps, right?
Yep.
And they missed him a couple times that he was open. Now, once Zy went over there, it was a different story. I don't know how much Blake travels like normally, and I know he does some of it, but I would have a hard time saying, hey, look, Zy, wherever he goes, pretty much. I mean, maybe it's not in absolutes, maybe it's 90% of the time, but Zy Alexander would be on Ryan Williams more than he's not. I know that for sure because he's your one guy. Like he is the guy right now that you can count on in the defensive backfield. It's a unit that is playing hard. They're playing more sound, but they're very limited, I think, outside of Zy Alexander. So that's one of the things, obviously, that if you're watching this from an LSU perspective, you're going to worry about. But also, like Jalen Milroe and what he can do with his legs. I mean, you just saw Marcel Reed. Now, again, you were planning for Wigman, and sure, there's some of that, and you've done good. You've done okay against some running quarterbacks this year. Arkansas, I thought you did well. Sellers actually got after you a little bit. He had the big hit there. That makes you terrified. It's not really like if they beat you in the passing game, like those are things I think you can overcome. If it turns into a game a la last year where you had no plan for Jalen Milroe and quarterback draws and things like that. Now, I have to imagine Blake Baker's going to have a spy. He's not going to pull a Matt House and just let him say, hey, guys, turn your back to Jalen Milroe and give him 12 free yards to get a running head start. I don't think it's going to be that. But who is that guy? Is it going to be Whit Weeks? If he's the spy, then that sounds like a plan, but you also take away the ability for Whit Weeks to react to other things. You take away the ability for Whit Weeks to add himself into the pressure, which he does a really nice job. Like a green dogging linebacker, when that running back, when you have him man and that running back decides, I'm going to stay in the protection or I'm going to block somebody else, and that linebacker immediately adds to the blitz. Whit Weeks does that as well as anybody with great timing. You lose that ability if he is the spy, but he's probably your most athletic linebacker. So it's like, all right, which way do we go? And so that's something Blake Baker and that staff has to decide who they spy Jalen Milroe with.
Yeah, it's a really interesting discussion. I'm very interested to see if Kalen DeBoer is going to recognize the need to have those design runs for Milroe, and more so even than he has for I think a little bit now with what he's tried to do with him offensively. Knew that was going to be a transition. Obviously, favorite memory in this rivalry for you has got to be '07 game-winning touchdown.
Ooh.
Is there
actually it's not. It's not.
Okay. All right, fire away.
There's a couple actually of great memories against Alabama. Now, the 2005 Alabama team, they don't get their flowers. They don't get the credit they deserve. And me and Roman are boys. And I always tell him this. So Roman Harper, great all SEC safety, was on that team. D'Amico Ryans was all SEC linebacker on that team. Like we could go down. Brody Croyle was the quarterback. They were undefeated in November. In '05, we go and play them and we win in overtime. Like it was a hell of a football game, and it was a battle. And that '05 Alabama team, they get forgotten about. And I understand, like, okay, I get it. Like, Saban comes, you win all these national championships, but that's a really good football team pre-Saban. And so that's like one of my, as in Bryant Denny as well. So that's one of my core memories against them. But probably the play that stands out the most is a play that got me drafted as high as I did in '07, but it wasn't the touchdown. Flynn threw an interception in that game.
As he does.
And
No,
and
I'm just
yeah,
kidding. I'm just
always. He
kidding.
threw three that game, three in the first half, I think. And I'm trying to think of the corner. I think the corner, and gosh, excuse me if I get I think it was Kareem Jackson, might have been the corner's name. Anyways, he's a high draft choice, but so he intercepts the pass. And when he does, I'm on the ground because I tried to cut block a guy on the edge. And so he intercepts it. He's down the sideline. Well, I get up and I chase him down and I catch him from behind. And I didn't think anything of the play. By the way, it's the only time I got a 15-yard penalty in my LSU career because I catch him and I'm in a sea of crimson and I'm trying to fight my way out of it. And of course, like the one guy in purple and gold trying to fight his way out of it, he gets the 15-yard penalty. So
Was it and I'm blanking on this. Did you do a punch to the helmet or anything like that?
I think I pushed somebody. I think I pushed.
It's weak.
Who did I push? It ended up being my teammate in San Diego, Castile, I think. Either way, I'll go back. I'll show you the evidence. It's grainy, but I'll show you the evidence. I have it somewhere, but I catch him from behind. And again, like at the time, I didn't think anything of it. I get a 15-yard penalty, which I wasn't very proud of. It's the only one that I, ever got, I think, in my entire career. But when I went to the combine that year, everybody like that I talked to, scouts were like, "Hey, it doesn't really matter what you run tomorrow. Like, I'm just letting you know, like that's the play that all of us have pulled up in our draft room is you
What
chasing
that?
down the corner, getting off the ground, and catching him from behind." They're like, "Look, if you run a 4.6, 4.7, 4, whatever, like we know that in full pads, like you can do that now." And even when I got drafted by the Chargers, like AJ Smith, the GM, he's like, "Hey, you ran, about what we thought you would, but it was that play against Alabama that we knew we could count on you on like special teams. And like if we had to have you carry the football at this level, that you could get it done because of me going to chase down a guy after Flynn threw an interception." And so, as you know, Matt Flynn, one of my best friends in this world, I'm like, God, I'm glad you sucked that day because if you didn't, I probably don't get drafted until like the 7th round.
Not the hurdle that you had to be able to get into the end zone.
No.
Nothing you did on offense. Not the million fourth downs you pick up against Florida, but the tackle that come from. Oh my God, that's incredible. I
Yeah.
didn't know that. Golly,
Yeah.
just goes to show you got to be gritty all the time. Just you never know who's watching. That's the thing about grittiness. You never know when
Oh,
it's going to be appreciated. But that
dude,
moment
Connor,
was.
my life has been you never know who's watching. Like every opportunity that I've ever like gotten in my career, Coach Saban comes to my high school practice to recruit our quarterback, John David Booty. He went and won 2 Rose Bowls at USC. And we were doing an Oklahoma drill, like old school Oklahoma, while you could still do those things. And I guess I had a good day that day in that drill. And he had no idea who I was before he got there, before he got to that practice. He was there to see, I think he always tells a story, and he tells it better than I do. Like 4 or 5 other guys from my high school, because I went to a really good high school. We had, 9 D1 guys, I think, my senior year. And he's like, "All right, who's 13? Tell me about the bowling ball." I think it's his exact words, playing running back over there. And so they tell him who I am. He watches the practice that day, and I get offered by LSU, by Nick Saban after getting there that day, not knowing who in the world I was.
Weren't you the last scholarship offer
Oh,
or the
yeah.
last?
Yeah. I was the
So the
lowest
last.
rated guy. Yep. I
Golly.
was 2-star guy. Again, Coach Saban had no idea who I was. Recruiting was different. I mean, all that was kind of new. Like today, you probably like he would have had an idea, but that day, back in '03 or whatever year that was, he had no idea. And it was because I didn't know he was watching. He was watching Oklahoma drill. And so, like, same thing, like for the Chargers, like one of the things that they talked about when they drafted me, we were at the Senior Bowl and it was me and Colt Brennan, and we stayed a little bit
RIP.
later. Yeah, absolutely, God, great human, love that dude. And then Matt Forte was on my team as well, and then Tashard Choice, who's actually the running back coach at Texas. Well, us 3 stayed after, and we lined up out wide to like run some routes and just work on some different things at the running back position that we could like, maybe do in the game to show versatility. And again, like the Chargers, AJ Smith, he's watching that practice and he's watching me after practice run routes at the receiver position. Something that Norv had heavily in his offense was for the F to be split out wide. And that was another factor in me getting drafted as high as I did. And it's like, I had no idea that the Chargers were sitting there watching me run whip routes on the outside, just, kind of shooting the bull with Colt Brennan.
It's unreal. And go figure the Saban thing, of course, in '07 when he's the coach of Bama and you realize he's, God, all I had to do was just not recruit that Jacob Hester guy and we probably find a way to win this game. Although, I mean, with all due respect, it was an amazing hurdle. It was from the one. Somebody else. No, you know what? No, I take that back. You're the only one that could have scored there. You're the only one that could have scored there.
Guys, Connor, you know me. I know thyself. I know what the vertical is, okay? Yep. Like, you probably didn't have to hurdle, but I remember, so Larry Porter's our running back coach, and it was not subtle at all. He looks over and he goes, hey, and kind of gives this motion, like over the top. And I'm I'm like pointing to me, like, you want Keelan in here? You want Trenton Holly? You want somebody else in here? He goes, no, you over the top. I'm like, all right. So it's predetermined that I was going to do it. It wasn't a feel thing because me, my style, like I never was going to leave my feet. But that's all you're getting because damn it, that's all I got. That's as high as I could get.
It was all you needed. It was beautiful. Speaking of lightly under-recruited running backs from the state of Louisiana, I say this not to bring up pain for you, but watching Dylan Sampson, man, the guy,
Sampson and Moss, both from Baton Rouge.
Good point. Golly, that's crazy to think about that. Yeah, I mean, I look at that guy and wonder how in the world was he lightly recruited? How did he get to this place where now he's on any short list of best backs in all of college football? But like, he didn't even get offered by LSU. I didn't realize that. Born in Baton Rouge and ends up going to he went to like Dutchtown High School, I think.
Yep.
And like 30 minutes from campus.
About 15 minutes that way. Yep.
Yeah.
Not even that, probably 10 minutes that way. Yep.
What do you like about his game? Because I've been just blown away at how important he's been for that offense as they've obviously struggled to kind of find it in the passing game.
Look, you and I talked about this. I think it was during the summertime. Like you and I both know what Heupel wants to get done within that offense, and he wants to run the football. It's a big misconception of who they are. And it's like you just see, fast pace and you see 11 personnel and you see 2x2 and you're like, oh, well, they're a spread team. They're probably throwing it 60 times a game when no, they want to run the football and they want to do it at a high level. But I think Sampson, for me, and maybe I'm missing somebody just off the top of my mind, I think he's the SEC Offensive Player of the Year.
I think, we agreed on that last Thursday. We were talking about that on Off Campus. I agree with you 100%.
I mean, how can he not be? Like what he's done for that team? He's almost got 20 touchdowns on the ground. Like he is a guy that, because Tennessee's offensive weapons at quarterback and receiver aren't as good as we thought they would be to this point. I think we can all agree there. And he's made up that slack to your point. Like he's been good, but he's been good when everybody knows probably going into the game what he's going to do in the game and how much he's going to be featured in the game. Like that's been the most impressive part. Like if you had the quarterback and receivers at Tennessee going out there and they're also balling and they're also putting up all these huge numbers, it's like, well, okay, is it because everybody prepares for everything else? They prepare for him and they prepare for that run game. There's no question about it. So to me, the numbers he's putting up with an offense that has to have him do those things, it makes it that much more impressive. And I mean, we could sit here and I could throw out some other names of guys that deserve to be in the conversation. I'm not saying it's a one-man competition right now, but he would be on the forefront of my SEC Offensive Player of the Year. And come on, like none of us had that before the year. I'm trying to go back in my, I think I had Luther Burden was probably my Offensive Player of the Year heading into the season. Obviously that hasn't worked out and that offense hasn't worked out. So yeah, right now, he is the reason why they are playing as well as they are offensively. Now, the defense is obviously stacked as well.
The only SEC offensive player more like as valuable as Dylan Sampson, in my opinion, Diego Pavia. Like, in terms of what he means for his team.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But
it's true. Hey, you know what? The quarterbacks, y'all get enough, okay?
Exactly.
Y'all get enough. Let's give it to a running back. God, Diego is fun to watch, though.
Is there a comp he reminds you of? Because I was kind of thinking, it was like 2018 Travion Williams, like a little bit of that. Different scheme, obviously, the Jimbo offense compared to what he's playing in with Heupel, but like kind of similar build, but the way he runs through contact, it's just he feels like just such a force, and obviously it's just been one of the better players in all of college football.
Now, like an A-Chain comp would maybe the speed doesn't match up, but just with the physicality that
He
he
ran through
runs with,
contact. Yeah. People
you know what
forget
I
that.
mean?
Yeah.
Like everybody just assumes like A-Chain's like, oh, he's a track guy. Well, that's okay. Like LSU's got a track guy running back that runs through people. Like you can be both. Like I think Caden Durham does that at a high level. I actually think the A-Chain would actually be, and actually Jimbo, I don't know if this was on air or off air. We were talking about Sampson, and he kind of said he reminded him of him as well.
Mm.
So, I mean, let's just pick any Jimbo running back. How about that?
I like that. I like that. All right, let's end with a Jimbo. I was going to ask you Jimbo anyway. Let's end with this. You've gotten to speak with him regularly with off campus and being
Yeah.
able to kind of pick his brain, talk all things football with him. I asked DJ this a couple of months ago when he was on. What's the sense you get about his desire to get back into coaching? Do you
Yeah.
think that happens when the carousel kind of gets spinning in the next month?
Yeah, me personally, I do. Now he's laid out, man, this is fun. I get to wake up on Saturday, no pressure, nothing weighing on me, no expectation to do A, B, and C. And I can just sit here and I can watch the games and enjoy them and react to them on Tuesdays. That part of it, I do think he's really enjoying. And I think he's enjoying the time with his family that he's never really had before. But you can tell there's still a fire in there for him to go lead a team. Now, the question that I've never really had with him, the conversation I never had with him is like, what level would he want to get back in at? Would it be, hey, I'm only doing the power four? I'm only doing blue bloods. Maybe I'm open to going to a top tier G5. Like, I don't know that information. Like, I don't know if it would have to be a certain job in a certain place. So I still think he has the desire to coach. I'd be shocked if he doesn't roam a sideline here again in the next couple of years. But is that opportunity going to come for him to say, you know what? This is great, but I'm going to jump back in it? Because if it's not the right situation, I don't know that would be the best move, right? I mean, it's hard when you've been the guy at Florida State and Texas A&M. Like, can you go to Purdue or somewhere like can you do that? Can you make that be okay? And can you go to work every day feeling like you're attacking the day that you always have?
West Virginia is going to be the one that, if that,
Yeah.
depending on how this goes last month for Neil Brown, that'd be
If
the one that people will circle back to.
If West Virginia opens up and they call Jimbo, I would be surprised if Jimbo Fisher is not the next head coach of West Virginia.
I agree with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's going to have to be the exact right fit. It's kind of why Mullen hasn't gotten back into it. Loves the media thing, loves being able to watch these
Yeah.
games, has soaked in all of it, but it's got to be the right fit with these guys, especially when they don't need the money. They definitely, we know that Jimbo does not need the money to be able to get back into this.
I don't need Jimbo to go take a job. You know why? Because during the breaks, him and I talk about 8U flag football passing plays, and we talk about concepts, and he gives me some different concepts. And so we've got a couple of plays that are named after Jimbo in our playbook. And so if he goes and coaches somebody else, I won't have that access to him. So I actually, selfishly, I need him to stay exactly where he's at. We got to go win this ring, Connor.
Your kids are going to be dominating tackle football very, very soon. And seeing the clips of all of your kids dominate flag football, I'm just like, that's not fair for these other kids that they got to line up and face a Hester in flag football. They probably don't even know. And then they show up and they're like, oh God, we're going to be in for it. This is not going to be a fun time. Yeah.
The best part is like, so my older sons now they're playing tackle, and my oldest is a freshman. He's
that's right
at 6'2", 240.
He's big boy. Big boy.
Yeah, he's got me by a lot in both of those. And he embraces playing like edge and left tackle. Like he's all about it. Like he don't want to run the football, So all of them are a little bit different. Now my two youngers, they want the ball in space.
Go players. Yeah.
That's what they want to do. And so yeah, man, it's so much fun watching them kind of grow up. And one grown past me, and my 12-year-old is right looking eye to eye with me. He also wants to be like big brother. He's in the trenches right now. Now he doesn't have the body type like older brother. He's a little light in the pants to be in the trenches, but he wants to be like older brother,
He's got time. He's got time. Yeah. He's 12. The growth spurt's going to come, I'm sure.
Hey, I tell him dad played nose guard till he was a junior in high school. You never know,
when you're a gritty Hester, you play anyway, man. Wherever the frame dictates, that's where you go.
That's right. Just put on a neck roll and go play.
Love it. Well, I really appreciate this as always. We'll talk again. We'll talk again tomorrow, actually.
We'll talk tomorrow. Absolutely. Every single week. It's the highlight of my week, Connor.
Highlight of my week. When I sign off, it's the low point of my week.
There you go.
Thanks, man.